Into the Woods by Reddit user NJ-216. I looked up at the rock shelter and smiled. I had arrived at my place of solace. My little escape from the stresses of life. Just big enough for me and my dog, Lolly, to curl up with a small fire and melt into the forest around us. The woods' sounds and sights were like a drug to me, and sitting amongst nature was my meditation form. I felt at home there, at peace with myself and the world, and I looked forward to that feeling again on this early fall night. After all, I needed time to myself. This year had been an awful one so far. I graduated from college and moved back home with my family while searching for jobs. The search had yet to produce any meaningful employment, but in honesty, I hadn't been looking too hard. My aunt passed away right after graduation. I was close with her, more so than I was with my mom, and her death left a hole in my heart. My aunt was the person that introduced me to the wonders of nature and taught me the basics of backpacking. My excursions only increased in frequency after her death, as I tried to fill the hole. Although I now often went alone, only accompanied by my dog and my aunt's memory, I found my little campsite the weekend of her funeral and took its discovery as a sign from above, a final gift to help me through this challenging period. I knelt down and placed my backpack and sleeping bag on the sandy ground beneath the overhang. This place was nothing exceptional to anybody else, just an eroded niche in a vein of sandstone, halfway up a steep hill. However, the warmth it took in from the fire kept me comfortable throughout the chilly nights, and the overhang protected me from the elements. This meant I camped without a tent, as it did little but to serve as a barrier between myself and the nature around me. My campsite was a couple of miles outside of town, just remote enough that I knew it was unlikely to be bothered, although the road was nearby and I could hike to my car in a couple of minutes, if needed. Both of these factors contributed to why I frequented this site so much. I looked over the area and stopped Lolly from digging in the remains of my last excursion's fire. The idea of snuggling up to a toasty fire in the woods seemed to excite my dog just as much as it did me. I bent down to clear the old ash from the pit in the preparation for the new fire, while Lolly stood by and watched. Being an Australian shepherd mix, she loved to join me in backpacking. I got Lolly from the shelter a few months before my aunt passed, and I wanted to change her name, but my aunt felt it was cruel to change the name of a middle-aged dog, so I kept it. I soon got a fire going with supplies collected nearby and sat down to admire the view from my hillside perch while my dinner cooked. Beneath me lay a valley covered in dense forest, and when the crickets' chirping lulled in short periods, I could hear a stream rambling somewhere unseen. The only unnatural sounds around me were the crackle of my fire and my small pot of water coming to a boil. I remember a feeling of peace flooding over me as I took the first bite of my meal, which consisted of only boiled chicken and rice. It was simple but satisfying. I sat by the fire while I ate and watched the stillness of the forest with my dog curled up at my side. I fed the scraps to Lolly, rolled out my sleeping pad, and grabbed my flask. I figured a few whiskey swigs would help me unwind even more, but I ended up drinking it all. It numbed my lingering thoughts of grief, and I soon found myself dozing off to the cricket's hum and the crackling fire. Lolly lay next to me, and I quickly fell into a deep sleep, with my arm wrapped around her. I woke up after the fire burned down to embers. Lolly still huddled against me, but she started to growl. I could feel her chest rumbling. That was what woke me up. I pulled her in to provide comfort, but the growl continued. This went on for several more minutes, before Lolly stood up and deepened her growl. I rushed to stoke the remains of the fire, and as the flames grew, I watched the fur on Lolly's back rise. Something deeply bothered her, and I threw the rest of my wood into the fire, hoping the extra light would calm us both. Until this point, I thought Lolly was growling at maybe a deer or a fox, but then I heard it, a nearby voice.
Hello?
I listened to a woman's voice call out from the woods. It was too late for other hikers to pass by. Something was wrong. Hello? Who's out there? I called out. There was no response. Instead, all of the wildlife went silent around me. The forest became uncannily quiet. The silence was soon interrupted by sticks and other foliage cracking somewhere off to my left. I scooted back against the rock shelter's wall and tried to pull Lolly back too, but she stayed put, continuing her deep growl and maintaining guard over me.
Lolly,
the unseen voice called out, somehow knowing my dog's name.
Lolly, come here, girl.
It beckoned from the darkness. I started to get really scared. I was locked in place by fear, and chills ran up my arms and down my spine as I recognized the voice. It sounded like my aunt, the one who had just died, my former backpacking companion, but there was no way in hell that was possible. "Who's there?" I asked again, growing more terrified by the second. "Tell me who's out there. This joke isn't funny." I did not get an answer, but the voice did respond, again calling out to my dog.
Lolly, good baby, come here, girl.
Lolly tilted her head to the side and stopped growling, seeming to consider the command. My blood was running cold.
Lolly, want a biscuit?
The voice called out in a tone more excited than before. I shrieked as my dog took off in the direction of the disembodied voice. Grabbing at my backpack, I rummaged around for my flashlight and clicked it on to search the tree line for my dog. I located her beside some brush about 100 feet away. "Lolly, get back over here," I demanded. She looked back at me for a second, but did not return when I called. Her attention was on the disembodied voice.
Lolly, biscuits,
the voice called once more. My dog took off further into the darkened woods. I grabbed my utility knife and chased after her. This was not a nasty prank. This was something more. Whoever had called after my dog did not have good intentions, and I needed to arm myself. The flashlight beam bounced ahead of me as I stumbled down the hillside into the thick brush. "Lolly!" I called out again. I heard her bark and took off in that direction, running a couple of 100 feet or so further. My feet sank into the ground as I entered a marshy clearing on the edge of the stream, but I still could not see my dog or the person calling her. "Lolly, get back over here!" I pleaded. Lolly barked from nearby, and I scanned the area with my flashlight. The blue-tinted beam came to rest on a pair of antlers peeking out from behind some brush, and I thought I had come across a resting moose. However, as the animal connected to the antlers slowly stepped out from behind its cover, I realized it was most definitely not a moose. This creature was something I had never seen before, and one I wished to never come across again. I followed the antlers down to a gaunt face covered by taut and shiny skin pulled so tight that the bone structure looked ready to push through from beneath. The distorted face appeared uncannily human, save for a grotesquely elongated snout and eyes sunken so far back that its sockets seemed emptied. I could smell its stench of piss and death from feet away. Drool dripped from its snout as it stepped out from behind the brush, revealing the rest of its body. The flashlight beam shook like crazy, but I could see that the creature had the emaciated body of a man, with long, thin arms and even ganglier fingers. I followed the body down to its legs, which, unlike the rest of the creature, were undeniably unhuman, covered in ripped, bloodied fur, and terminated at a pair of cloven hooves. I stood still, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. The creature must have realized this and began to sulk closer. I watched its mouth open as it produced several low wails before starting to speak.
"Lolly!"
It called out in a voice now sounding like my own. I stumbled back and started to run back to my campsite. A loud whooshing noise came from behind me, and I looked over my shoulder, but the creature had disappeared. I ran faster, disturbed that whatever I had seen slipped back into the darkness. The light of my campfire started to poke through the brush, and I clambered up the hill towards it, hoping that my dog would be there to join me. I felt lucky when I saw Lolly next to the fire pit, with her back to me, growling. I thought she was alerting me to the creature's hiding place, and I hurried to grab my car keys while she still pointed towards the woods, snarling. "Come on, let's go," I said, stomping out the fire. Looking over at my backpack and other supplies, I decided to come back later for them. Lolly must have caught on, because as soon as the fire went out, she darted off in the direction of the car. My adrenaline had taken over by this point, and we made it to the roadside in barely 2 minutes. The creature seemed to be nowhere in sight as I looked around my car, but I soon heard whimpering off a short distance away. I panicked, thinking the creature would sneak up on me, and I rushed to unlock my doors. Just as I was about to open the door for Lolly, another dog emerged from the shadows, another Australian Shepherd identical to Lolly. I then realized this other dog was Lolly. I looked down at the dog I had followed to the car and confirmed it was not the real Lolly. When I pointed my flashlight at its face, I screamed in a way I never thought possible. This animal looked just like my dog, but its eyes were sunken, just like the creature. It had somehow transfigured itself into a copy of Lolly. Thankfully, my real dog ran to my side and put herself between me and the creature. It backed off and started to transform once again, stretching and growing in height. Its antlers began to pierce through the skin as it shed the fur used to disguise itself. I screamed again as it bared its mangled teeth, and I flung open the car door before it could come at me. I clambered in, right behind my dog, and drove home. I didn't exit the vehicle until my garage door closed behind me. I remember sitting in my car and crying, trying to figure out what just happened. I still don't know what I saw, but I feel it might have been a Wendigo after doing some researching. I never believed in legends like that, but I have no other way to explain what I experienced. I don't want to imagine what would have happened if I had gotten into the car with that thing. If Lolly had not saved me, I probably would not be here to share the story. And as much as I want to, I have yet to go back for my belongings. I'll need a few more backpacking buddies and a hunting rifle before I'll ever venture out into those woods again. The Time I Saw a Wendigo by Reddit user I Merciless Void. First things first. This happened to me when I was around 10. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only knew as Warm River. The river there never freezes over. And my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way, I heard a terrible screech at the end that we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights. I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never this metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped about 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset, though my brother reassured me that we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day and my life continued as usual. I was disconcerted, but chalked what happened up as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later, I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghost in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousins, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, and older cousins would hide in nearby trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. As I was searching near the base, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our locations. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree. Yeah, you can guess why it was called that. So I began trekking up towards the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on wearily and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I would find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun out back of the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousin's. "Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me." So I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature, I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people, my cousins, at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking, and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened, and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that, but those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game, Until Dawn, became really popular, and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in the game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw, and I did a ton of research on them. I figured someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge, and must have resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and it scares the hell out of me every time. I swear I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. Wish me luck, Reddit. A Wendigo is Watching Me, by Reddit user Foxiana123, known also on YouTube as Queen Fopsy. Recently, a few months ago, I moved into a new house in the mountains. It's almost always cold, and I'm surrounded by woods, but I like it as it's easier to do my job in isolation, with very little distractions. I sell paintings and am paid a small monthly check to write poems for a magazine that is both online and physical. The new surroundings have given me all sorts of inspiration both for writing and painting. The strange occurrences started about a week into my living there. More and more frequently, I'd find dead animals nearby. Not really gored or anything, just dead. Rabbits, birds, and the occasional fox. It freaked me out, but I just assumed that a predator of sorts was showing off because they felt threatened by me. I decided to always carry around a gun and a taser, just to be safe. I also decided to call an expert of the mountains and asked him to visit. When he came, he seemed worried. Now, this man was a fairly old Native American who had lived in these mountains for about his whole life, so this concerned me, knowing he knew just about everything on this mountain. He sat me down and told me a tale of a dark creature, born of hunger and cold, a Wendigo. I was skeptical. This was a creature of fiction, at least I thought it was. He left me with a stern warning to never stray too far from home without good reason, and never follow the voices in the forest, as it may be a Wendigo luring me to their feeding grounds. I spent the next few days watching the woods closely. Maybe if I got a glimpse of whatever it was in the woods, my mind could be put at ease. At first I saw nothing, but then I saw swift movement among the underbrush and trees. It wasn't until around the 5th day of watching I saw something clearly. Something standing upright, with deer-like legs, staring at me with pale eyes. I quickly went inside, suddenly feeling chilled to the bone. It took a bit of some self-pumping before I could go back outside to do my painting and woodwatching. I found myself putting what I could see of the creature in my paintings, but I could never catch the coldness of its eyes quite right. It fascinated and terrified me greatly, but I couldn't stop. The creature got braver, showing a bit more as time passed. I could now confirm that it had a large set of antlers, and its front limbs were not hooves, like its back legs, but had claws. It watched me almost as curiously as I watched it. I knew then that it was likely a Wendigo, one that decided to watch me, although I didn't dare attempt to approach it, knowing its curious nature might be as deceiving as a wolf's smile. Although I never verbally called it this name, I subconsciously named it Branch. It seemed suiting. He started, or I think it was him, pushing over items on my porch, like empty paint pots and small decorations, going back to the tree line by the time I come outside. It didn't really bother me as nothing got damaged. It kind of reminded me of a cat, actually. I began speaking to it, not expecting any sort of response. While I painted, I would just ramble out loud, knowing he was at the trees. I don't know if he listened, but I think he did, as his ears would face towards me the whole time. Those long, slightly disproportionate ears. One day, he appeared with scars, a few still bleeding. This concerned me, but I couldn't get close to him. He was just an injured animal and would have likely attacked me if I got close. After a few days, they healed to pale marks on his skin. This happened a few times, but I learned to ignore it. This routine went on for a good while. I watched him and he watched me, but we kept our distance. Though that changed yesterday. He approached me and I didn't even notice until I saw his shadow. I looked up and saw shaggy black fur that smelled like rotting meat. I could see his cold, empty eyes so clearly now. They were genuinely curious, but hungry. I didn't move. I froze up. I didn't even shiver. After what seemed like an eternity, he turned and headed toward the trees, but I didn't dare move until he disappeared among the tree line. I went inside and called the man that warned me of them, and he thankfully agreed to come pick me up when he could. I'm waiting for the man to get here, and Branch is just staring at me through the window. After a few hours of waiting, the man pulled in the front, which, unlucky for me, was where Branch was. I got the pork chop that I had pulled out earlier and stepped outside. Branch was staring through the window. When he turned to look at me, I made sure to look at his chest fur rather than his cold, dead eyes. I threw the meat and he ignored it, didn't even twitch. I started to slowly move toward the man's truck, but Branch's eyes were tracking me. As I moved off the porch, he started to follow me, his hooves making heavy footfall in the wood. His eyes never left me as I made my way towards the truck. He slowly followed, staying 3 feet away, no more, no less. When I finally made it to the truck, he was still staring, with those cold, empty eyes. The man slowly pulled out and started down the long mountain trail. He started muttering about how I shouldn't have let it get this far, as well as some other, more colorful words. Right now I'm at his cottage at the base of the mountain. I'm still a bit shaken, and I don't know if I want to risk going back. His wife is lovely and treats me well, as far as guests go, I guess. But I know I'll have to leave soon. The man explained that the Wendigo was one that was well known on the mountain, known for only attacking young females, always leaving the head intact. Now, this is only semi-relevant as I am a man, but he can't explain why he's taken a sudden interest in me. Maybe he's contemplating eating me. In a few hours, he's taking me back. He's given me some food, a gun, several rounds, and a blowtorch. He ended up bringing me back, and I got home about an hour ago. Branch wasn't there, but my porch looked like a tornado passed, and I think there's shit on the doorstep. I quickly went inside and locked the doors and windows. I don't think he knows I'm back yet, and I frankly don't want him to. It's been a few hours and no sign of him. I don't want to go outside to tidy up my porch. I'm too scared to. It's hard to swallow the sandwich I made because of the tension I'm feeling, but I have to eat. I think I'm going to take a nap after I finish it. I must have passed out for a while. I'm not entirely sure how long. But he's here. He's staring into the windows and making distorted huffs and brays, occasionally stamping his hooves on the porch. He can't see me right now because I'm behind the couch, but he sounds angry. He started banging his antlers on the glass. He's trying to fucking break it. It's starting to crack. The glass shattered, and my heart is pounding. My ears are ringing. I can smell the rotten meat he reeks of. He crawled through the window. I think he can smell me. He started knocking over random things, but I'm frozen. I can't bring myself to peek. I might try to make a run for it, or I'll have to wait it out. He just went down the hall. I'm going to go out front and run. I'm not sure how far I ran, but the sun went down by the time I stopped, and the temperature is definitely below freezing. Luckily, I was already wearing a heavy coat, and I found a small overhang. I will rest here. Hopefully he doesn't find me. I just woke up, but it's still dark out. It's only midnight. I slept 3 hours. I'm shivering like crazy, but the overhang helps a little, blocking the wind. The forest seems still. Nothing is stirring. Not even the owls are hooting. I'm going to go back to sleep, and hopefully the sun will be up when I wake up this time. I just woke up about an hour or so ago and started walking toward the base of the mountain. My limbs feel numb, but the movement has helped. The forest is still eerily quiet, and I keep finding blood puddles and tufts of fur. I think Branch threw a massive tantrum. I need to find a house with people in it. Safety in numbers. I didn't bring the gun. I know I'm stupid, but I just wanted to get away from him. I started running again. I heard what sounded like hooves, and I swear I smelled rotting flesh again. If he catches me on his turf, I'm honestly fair game to kill, even if I'm not his preferred food. I found a field of corpses. Deers, bears, rabbits, wolves, birds, dead animals everywhere. I quickly went around it, holding my breath, trying not to puke. I guess that's why the forest was so quiet. He must have killed all the animals in a fit, like a violent child throwing a tantrum. A child that could easily rip out my throat and cave in my ribcage and skull. I'm seriously hoping he isn't following me. I can see houses. I think I found one of those retreats for monks or whatever who take vows of silence. I'm going to see if they can help me. So, good news. They happily let me into a living area where I could warm up and provided food and a warm drink. I think it's just milk. They contacted someone and wrote me a note saying that someone would be coming for me to take me off the mountain. A few decided to be curious, so I explained what happened. A few wrote me off, but others gave me some scared and shocked looks. They've taken me to the bedroom and communicated that I can sleep until the person coming to get me actually gets here. When he does, I'm not going back. My things can stay there, as can Branch. I'll find somewhere else to live, like an apartment, in a city, with people. I was able to sleep a few hours before the guy came. I told him to just take me to the nearest town. I'm outside a motel right now, slowly making calls and arrangements. I am never going back to that place, with that thing, ever. My Wife Turned into a Wendigo by Reddit user Ruse85. The winter season was upon us, and droves of Wendigo spotters had descended upon our small town to try to get a glimpse of something that I believed didn't exist. It all started 2 years back when Billy Fisher brutally murdered his wife Jane and her 2 poor daughters. When he was arrested, he claimed in his defense that he was driven mad by some kind of beast that followed him home from the lake he was fishing at one night. It affected me and my wife greatly, as we were neighbors. We had no kids of our own, so we looked after the girls whenever we could. We basically treated them like they were our own kids. We were close friends, and when he came and asked me for help, I honestly thought he was crazy. I wish I had listened to him, and ever since then, the town has been besieged by conspiracy theorists looking to get a sight of something that apparently doesn't exist. One night, I was sitting down in the living room watching telly when I heard my wife scream from the kitchen. I ran in to find that she had dropped a meatloaf all over the floor. Concerned, I asked her what happened. She seemed terrified. She told me she had seen something staring through the kitchen window at her, and that it had big red eyes. I tried to reassure her that it was probably one of those Wendigo spotters, trying to get a picture of one of us locals. They have been known to do that. They come up here and think it's fair game to harass us and trespass on our land. After my wife calmed down, we decided to go to bed. I made sure all of the windows and doors were shut tight and locked. That night, as I tossed and turned, I woke to find my wife missing from the bed. I could see my breath and the air was brisk. Someone had opened the bedroom window. I went to close it, and that's when I saw my wife standing in the back garden, staring into the woods. I called her name, but no reply. I ran down the stairs, but all the windows and doors were still shut and the keys were still in the drawer where I had left them. Even though I had my coat on, it was still as cold as anything. It must have been below freezing, and my wife was just standing there in her nightgown. I called her name and she didn't even acknowledge me. I shouted at her and shook her until she came around, and eventually I got her back in the house and back to bed. The next morning, she remembered nothing. At first she didn't believe me. She thought I must have dreamt it. That was till I showed her the mud in her nightgown. That was until I showed her all the mud on her nightgown. I didn't blame her for being perplexed about the whole situation. It was totally out of character for her. The rest of the day had gone by, and apart from chasing a few out-of-towners from my land, it was an uneventful evening. That night, before we went to bed, I made sure everything was double locked and I hid the keys. Horrible nightmares filled my mind as I slept. I dreamt of a monstrous creature that stalked the woods behind my house. The creature walked upright like a human, but it wasn't human. Its legs were similar to that of a goat, but big and strong. It had massive talons for hands, and it had leathery, jet black skin with deep red scars covering its torso. Its head looked like a skinned goat's head. Its eyes glowed red, and big towering antlers sprung from its back. As it stalked me through the woods, I could hear it calling me, but it sounded like my wife. I turned to see my wife standing there, and as I walked towards her, she transformed into the beast. That's when I woke up. I looked, and my wife wasn't in bed with me. The sheets were covered in blood, and I felt searing pain all over my chest. I looked down and saw a load of deep claw marks dug into me. I heard a growl come from the corner. I looked to find my wife cowering. She was shaking while licking my blood off of her fingers. She seemed delirious. She screamed at me not to come near her, and she would just keep on saying that she was hungry. I was eventually able to calm her down. Her temperature was through the roof, so I decided to call the doctor. When he got here, I brought him up to the bedroom to see my wife. I left him alone while I went downstairs to make coffee, and as the coffee brewed, I heard a gut-wrenching scream come from the bedroom. The doctor then came sprinting down the stairs screaming that she bit him, and he ran out of the door, not even looking back. I sat with my wife and watched over her as she tossed and turned all night. She rambled on for hours about the woods and how hungry she was. I eventually drifted off to sleep, but when I awoke the following morning, she was gone. After frantically searching the house, I found no sign of her except for a note that was left on the kitchen table. The only words on the note were, "I love you." A few days after I reported my wife missing, the police called me into the station and showed me security footage that was taken the night before. 2 bodies had been found near the woods, badly mutilated, and my wife was caught on camera walking from the scene near the woods. I know my wife is out there somewhere, in the woods maybe. I have seen the form she takes from time to time. Now I spend my days searching for a way to bring her home. The strange thing is, both my wife and Billy Fisher were Native American. Maybe there's some sort of connection there. I woke up in the woods, and I don't know how I got here. By Reddit user Avon Sayu, also known on YouTube as Avon Fox. Okay, is this recorder working? Alright, yes, I think it is. So, I just woke up in the woods. I have no idea where I am or how I got here, but one thing is for sure, there's no need to panic. Okay, well, never mind. There's definitely a need to panic. For some reason, my foot is tied to a tree. Alright, untied my foot. Okay, the last thing I can remember is going to sleep last night after painting for a little while. I was painting a fictional creature. What was it? Think it was a Wendigo? A Wendigo, yeah, that's what it was. Guys, I think something's out here with me. I heard something shifting. What if it is a Wendigo? It's gonna eat me. Oh God, here it comes! Oh, never mind, it was just a fox. The little guy ran off as soon as he saw me. Huh. Seems like there's other files in this recorder. I'm gonna check them out. December 10th, 2020, 9:38 a.m. I seem to have woken up in the middle of the woods with no memory of how I got here. I wonder where here is. My foot appears to be tied to a tree. That is a little alarming. The last thing I can confidently recall is going to sleep. I think that the best idea would be to find a source of fresh water and shelter for the day. The best way to do that is to go downhill. The forest slopes eastward, so that is the direction I'll head. After walking for a short time, I came across a large pond. It appears to have fish in it. That's good news. I think I can try to spear them and cook them over a fire. I only have a pocket knife, so I will have to carve the spear from a long stick. Shelter is the main goal for right now. There's a large rock in a thicket of trees on the opposite shore of the pond. I walked over and observed the surrounding foliage. It looks like grass and clovers, both of which are not harmful to humans. This spot will work. It is sheltered from the wind and in very close proximity to a clean water source. I'll work on gathering some reeds and sticks to make some sort of shelter. I'll keep you posted, whoever might find this. December 10th, 2020, 6:24 p.m. I built a roof out of 2 walls protruding from the boulder sufficing for a 3rd wall, leaving 1 empty wall for me to enter and exit the shelter. Now I want to work on building a fire. I'll have it about 1 meter from the entrance of the shelter, so I stay warm, but I can enter and exit as I please. I gathered a large stack of small twigs and large logs, and a few handfuls of dry grass. I made a circle of stones around where I will build the fire so it stays contained, and I carved a dent in the middle of the stones so the ashes and charcoal stay contained and don't fly away as well. I tore a twig against the log and a handful of dry grass. It takes a few tries and a couple of breaks, but I finally managed to get a fire going. It's getting dark, so the last thing I will do for today is carve the spear. I'll talk to you later. December 11th, 2020, 7:02 a.m. It's the next morning. Yesterday I made a lot of progress. Today the goal is food. I have already made my spear and rolled up my pant legs. I tied my hair back with a reed and walked down to the pond. The sun had risen barely an hour earlier, but I think that now would be a good time to start fishing. I waded up past my calves and readied my spear. I will update later. This might take a while. Until then. December 11th, 2020, 4:23 p.m. I spent until about noon trying to catch a fish. Then I took a break to restart the fire. That took a while. Then I gathered more firewood and went back to trying to spear some fish. The fish were a bit difficult, so I went after something a bit easier. I caught a rabbit, speared it, and then skinned it. It's nasty, but I gutted it. Now it's cooking on a spit over my fire. It won't be the tastiest meal, but it will be something. There isn't much meat though. I'm just hoping that the fire attracts someone to come out here and find me. I think I'll put another layer of branches on the roof of the shelter. Good night. December 12th, 2020, 1:56 a.m. I think that there's something out here with me. Something big. I thought it was a deer. I saw its antlers. It's no deer. That thing is nothing like anything anyone has seen before. It's a man with a deer's head. The antlers are absolutely massive. I should be more quiet from now on. Keep the fire small. It might lower my chances of someone seeing the smoke, but at least it could keep me alive. I will have to find a way out of here on my own. Wish me luck sleeping. December 13th, 2020, 1:25 p.m. I didn't sleep at all the last 2 nights. It seems the monster only shows up at night. I think I will hunt at sunrise, eat, and then sleep during the day. If there's a city nearby, then the lights will be easier to spot by night anyways. I will put the fire out at night so that it doesn't attract the monster. Right now I have eaten and gathered firewood for tomorrow, so I will go to bed. Good night, or good afternoon. December 13th, 2020, 8:24 p.m. It's moonrise now, so I have to put out the fire and grab my spear. Time to explore. I will head back west because that is where I initially woke up. I will see if I recognize anything and then head whichever way I feel most comfortable. I will update you later. Good night. December 14th, 2020, 6:49 a.m. It's sunrise. I spent all night looking. Once I got to the place where I woke up, I looked around and didn't recognize anything, so I headed south. Don't ask why, just a gut feeling. I walked for about 10 miles and then I spotted it. I was standing at the top of a hill, the trees towering all around me. I saw the sparks, the lights in the distance. A town. It was heaven. As if the gods had descended all in one spot and their lights glowed fervently in the darkness of the night. A beacon, calling me to them. But that euphoric state was short-lived. The monster appeared, its gnarly antlers nodding in my direction. With deadly precision it charged at me. I turned and ran faster than I ever had before. Once I made it to the spot I woke up, it seemed to have disappeared. I ran back to my shelter, and by then I was out of breath. I collapsed, heaving. I rolled down the hill to the pond and took huge gulps of water. Once my stomach was full, I turned on my side and spewed out everything I just took in. The second time I drank from the pond, I drank slower, and I drank less, just so that I retained everything I drank. I sat in my shelter for a while. By then, I could barely make out the sun's rays in the horizon, and that is where we are now. It's time to go to sleep. Tomorrow night, we make spears. The night after that, we make a break for the town. I probably won't make it. If anyone finds this recorder, head to the town in the daylight. I will leave it at the place I woke up. Good luck. December 15th, 2020, 7:34 a.m. It's time. Yesterday I made a stack of spears and weaved a long quiver for them from the reeds. The quiver should strap on my back so that I can easily grab a spear. The sun is in sight now. It's time to go. A long and dangerous journey lays before me. I have to leave the recorder now. Goodbye, listener. And good luck. Okay, well, not quite what I had expected to hear. But I think I'll go look for the shelter that he talked about. Downhill does appear to be east, shockingly. After walking for about 10 minutes, I found the pond and the shelter. There was a circle of rocks and a stash of firewood, and the pocket knife that the guy said that he had in his pocket. I figure I may as well try to build a fire. No, I should carve some spears instead. After rummaging around the forest for a while, it turns out that the man was wrong. The creature does walk around during the day. It seems to walk around the shadiest parts of the forest, and I think it is afraid of the light. So day does seem like the best option to make a break for the city. But it is still dangerous. I could die. Oh my, it just hit me. I'm going to die out here. I'm going to die all alone out here and nobody will ever know what happened. Nobody will ever know what is out here. No, I need to focus. Alright, it's sunset. I carved about 8 spears, and weaved a bundle around them so I can strap them to my back just like the guy did. It's probably a really bad bundle, though. I'm sitting and trying not to fall asleep. Who knows what would happen if I do. Better not to think about that right now. I'm really bored. Okay, well, I'm still bored. I can see the first few lights of dawn. Just a little more time, then I should be able to head out. I can see the sun now. I think I'll also leave the recorder where I woke up, just in case. It's time to go. And then, with shaky spear in hand, I dropped the recorder by the rope my foot was tied into. I set off south just like the guy said. It was going to be a long walk. About an hour in, nothing had happened so far. I thought I could see the hill that the writer was talking about, though. I could just barely make it out on the horizon. But the hill was a bit further than I originally anticipated. I did manage to scale it. I could see the city then. It had a few skyscrapers, but it wasn't massive. I continued on, thinking that there was someone there that could help me. The sun was directly above me in the sky, and it was a bit too hot out for my liking. My whole body was drenched in sweat. I had to keep going. I just hoped that I could make it to the city by nightfall. It was about 6 p.m., I would say, that a minor issue. The monster seemed to be waiting for me. It kept following me through the forest, but it stayed in the shadows. I had to make it to the city by nightfall. I started to jog, and I could see the city sprawling out before me now. Unfortunately for me, the sun had just set, and the creature was about 400 feet in front of me. It charged at me, but I evaded and made a run for it. It tripped and stumbled, but got back up and charged at me again. The antlers on that thing for sure were going to give me an infection. They did just stab me in about 3 different places in my back. I felt my left ribs, my right ribs, and a huge gash going along my side. The blood was just pouring out, but I knew I could make it. I was just still running towards the city. The creature backed off as soon as I set foot in the city. I had made it. It seemed to be confined to the woods. I banged on the first friendly-looking door I came across and collapsed into the arms of a woman who opened the door. She looked at me with fear and curiosity, but mostly worry. No questions asked, she drove me to the hospital. I was safe at last, and I am never going back there again. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, giving the video a like will really help out. If you know of any stories, or are an author of any stories that you would like to hear me narrate, be sure to let me know in the comments. Or you can tweet at me on Twitter at 2spooky4u5. Thanks for listening.